As you know, one of Donald Trump's nicknames for President Biden is Sleepy Joe. So you might find it ironic and hilarious that it was reported Trump himself fell asleep in court today during his Manhattan trial, which has rightly made him a target for mockery by the media, by progressive commentators, and by the Biden campaign. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to play in this video. Unfortunately, none of them of Trump himself nodding off because cameras aren't allowed in this courtroom, at least as of yet. But this was reported by journalists on site in the courtroom who were watching events unfold. Now, Donald Trump makes fun of the energy levels of his political opponents. He did it with Jeb Bush during the 2016 election. He did it with Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election. He's done it with President Biden in the 2020 election and in the 2024 election. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember that Donald Trump himself is a very, very old and, based on physical evidence, very unhealthy, right? He's overweight. He has a terrible diet. He doesn't exercise. And listen, people fall asleep during boring proceedings. So normally I don't think we should begrudge the fact that a 77-year-old unhealthy man fell asleep in court. But because of how Donald Trump characterizes his opponents and people he doesn't like and makes fun of them, this rightly makes him a target for disdain and mockery by everybody else. And we should delight in it and make fun of it because he set the standard. So we're going to play a couple of clips. This is Maggie Haberman from the New York Times talking to Jake Tapper about the situation. And then we'll play some even more fun clips.
Maggie, I have to ask, you guys have been, at the Times, have been live blogging this event. And 40 minutes ago, you wrote an observation that I was very surprised. Trump appears to be sleeping. His head keeps dropping down and his mouth goes slack. Tell us about that.
Well, Jake, he appeared to be asleep, and repeatedly his head would fall down. There have been other moments in other trials, like the Agent Carroll trial, which was around the corner in January, where he appeared very still and seemed as if he might be sleeping, but then he would move. This time, he didn't pay attention to a note that his lawyer, Todd Blanche, passed him. His jaw kept falling on his chest, and his mouth kept going slack. Now, sometimes people do fall asleep during court proceedings, but it's notable given the intensity of this morning and a lot of what was being argued.
I love how they're treating this very somberly, right? And Jake Tapper, who has a very dry sense of humor, he's like, "What? Could you tell us more about that?" And Maggie's like, "Well, he fell asleep," right? Again, normally this wouldn't be a big deal for the very reasons that Haberman pointed out. Like, listen, it's not uncommon for people to fall asleep in court, but because Donald Trump has set the standard for energy levels, it's important to make fun of him at this time, especially as we, get into the thick of a heated presidential election. But of course, Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, two progressive commentators on MSNBC, had even more fun with it. So we're going to play some clips and again unpack them together.
Get here, the wheels of justice grind slowly. I did not think they would grind so slowly that they would rock the defendant apparently to sleep at the defense table today. I mean, I have to say, I was not there. I do not know if he was asleep. It is possible he was, meditating or just resting his eyes or something. I don't know. But that's those headlines, on the front page of the New York Times, front page of the Washington Post, front page of the Huffington Post, front page of multiple news outlets today coming out of this, that Trump appeared to fall asleep on the first day of his trial. Those are going to stick. I mean, I know it's not the most important legal thing, but we are in the middle of a campaign, and the age issue is the main thing the Trump campaign wants to use against his opponent. The whole Sleepy Joe thing. I mean, this is, as you said, Ari, this is the most historic thing that Donald Trump has ever done. No president ever has been, no former president ever has been a criminal defendant. And on day one, the headlines coming out of it are that he appeared to doze off. And to me, that's just, I mean, it's insane. It's also a reminder of how scary, however scary and somber and important this is. We're also dealing with somebody who is just fundamentally buffoonish. And this will be as much a reminder of that as it is of all the more serious things here that are at stake.
It will be interesting to see if the Fox Propaganda Network pays any attention to this whatsoever, and if they do, how exactly they will go about covering it. I imagine they'll be like, listen, power naps, the scientific literature on power naps and their utility is beyond question. Donald Trump was taking a 5 to 15 minute short-term power nap, which boosts energy levels and mood. And all of that is true, by the way, that power naps do that. But I mean, they'll come out like they'll be so pro power nap. And then again, if President Biden were to fall asleep during such a thing, they would ridicule it as an example of his manifest unfitness for office. So again, I think Matt was correct to point out this, even though she also acknowledges that in terms of its merits, it's not really substantive, but it's important to point out his buffoonishness. Chris Hayes also had a lot of fun with this as well.
Well, just to Rachel's point about the campaign dynamics, the optics of all this, and the sustained eye resting that apparently happened in the courtroom. I mean, I do feel like if you call your opponent Sleepy Joe, you have one job.
Stay
for the
awake.
rest of the campaign, which is like you got to like clockwork orange those puppies like open at all times. But it's also interesting too to imagine. I mean, again, this man who I think is not a particularly emotionally regulated individual and does not have a tremendous degree of self-mastery and discipline, in a situation in which, to your point, Ari, he doesn't control things, in which he doesn't control the pace, the conversations are happening outside of his purview, but he has to sit there and watch it. I mean, it is. I really can't think of a thing that's more nightmarish in some ways for him, just at a personal level of like, you don't have like the stimulus, you're not getting like little ego bumps from some social media replies, and you just got to sit there and watch this.
Somebody should jangle car keys in front of him or something kept his attention, you know. I mean, again, so funny that this stuff is being pointed out. President Biden's campaign's having a field day with it, sitting in court, and they have this meme of Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal, I sleep, and then posting at 3 a.m. about taking away a woman's right to choose, wide awake, real shit. The meme game coming from the Biden campaign has just been unstoppable, so much better than the Trump campaign in that respect. And it's good that, again, they're taking every opportunity to try to level the playing field in terms of the perception. Because, again, even though Donald Trump is almost the same age, even though he seems physically, at least in terms of actuarial tables and physical qualities, again, like weight and exercise and diet, he is less physically fit than President Biden. A lot of people think that Trump is more fit because he talks louder or he talks faster and he doesn't have a stiff gait, right? We know that according to President Biden's physicals, he has a stiffness in his gait, right? But Biden bikes, Biden does yoga, Biden works out, Biden swims. We have no evidence of this from Donald Trump. And Trump has been exploiting the perceived infirmity of the president compared to him. But I'll also point out that poll after poll after poll shows that more Americans than not think that neither of these men are physically or mentally fit to be president. So it's incumbent on President Biden and the Biden campaign and his surrogates to exploit that and try to diminish the gap as much as possible. Another observation, which I thought was interesting, came from a guy on Twitter, Eric Schultz, who said, in the 4 weeks after the Her report, the New York Times wrote 30 stories on Biden's age. Interested to see how many they write on this development. Indeed, I'm also interested, right? Because the New York Times is supposedly liberal media, but as we know, they actually, like most mainstream media, grade Trump on a curve. If this were Biden, they would be writing, this would be front page news for the next 3 news cycles, right? Will it be the case for Trump? I don't know. But hopefully you and I and the Biden campaign and those of us who are sane and want the same standard applied to both will make it a national headline issue. Let me know what you think in the comments.